Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to welcome you here to the Social Justice Forum. My name is Jo Beld, and I'm a member of Westminster's Faith and Action Council. The Social Justice Forums are built around a common theme this program year, and the theme is Building Solidarity Together, walking alongside all of God's people, striving for a more just world, acting courageously to transform social systems and relationships. Along with Westminster member Vince Thomas, I served as co-chair of the Enduring Hope Capital Campaign Mission Component Team. Our team learned about the Division of Indian Works and its commitment to providing transformative programs for the American Indian community to increase academic achievement and to develop young leaders. We hope Westminster continues to learn from and with the Division of Indian Work. This morning, we're pleased to welcome members of the Young Women's Society from the Division of Indian Work to share who they are, what they have done, and what they are planning to do. Additionally, they're going to discuss using their Sacred Sisters podcast to bring attention to injustices about which they feel passionate. I'm going to do a short round of introductions to our panel and then cover a couple of guidelines for our conversation together, and then we'll get started. Our panel members, and I'll just ask them to signal who they are as I say their names. Madeleine Ducheneau is the co-founder of the Young Women's Society. She's worked at the Division of Indian Work for 8 years as a youth worker with the Youth Leadership Development Program. She is Lakota and an enrolled member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in South Dakota. Grace Baker is currently a student at the Aveda Arts and Sciences Institute. She's a jingle dress dancer and is from the Red Lake, Prairie Island, and Cheyenne River Sioux nations. Sita Baker is a senior at the University of Minnesota. She's also a member of the Young Women's Cabinet through the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. She's a traditional dancer and is from the Red Lake, Prairie Island, and Cheyenne River Sioux nations. Sadie Allen is a youth worker at the Division of Indian Work. She has a business with her sister called Lightning Stone Arts, where they sell their own beadwork. She is Lakota from Rosebud and Ojibwe from White Earth. Just a reminder about how we engage these forums. You know, we have people here in the room and people online. So during our conversation with our panelists following their presentation, for those of us who are here in person in the Meisel room, raise your hand and we will bring a microphone to you so that everyone, including those on the live stream, and those who watch the stream later on demand, can hear your question or your comment. For those of you attending on the live stream, welcome. We're glad you're here. Please submit your comment or question in the live stream chat, and we'll monitor that and raise your question and or comment. As part of our ongoing effort to promote respectful conversation around concerns in our community, the Social Justice Team has established some guidelines for the Social Justice Forum that you now see on the screen. This morning, I just want to highlight our third point about concise questions. Our time is always limited. There's always more to learn than we have time for during this 1 hour. So please take a moment to review all the guidelines, but keep this one in mind in particular. Before we get started then, I'd like to offer a short prayer for our time together. Let us pray. Holy One, God of justice, breathe into us today a spirit of curiosity and humility. Help us to engage with mindfulness, following the lead of voices from our community. Guide our speech and our self-awareness so that we may honor the divine in all people. Amen. So now, Please welcome our panel for this morning's forum.
Hamadak yapi chante washtena pechiu zapiye. I would just want to say hello, my relatives. I greet you with a heart handshake. I am Madeline Duchenot, and I am one of the co-founders with my coworker Rika Rivera, who's not here today. And at the Division of Indian Work, we decided to create this Young Women's Society because we saw a need that our young women kind of needed a safe space to be together. They're very passionate about certain injustices, so we decided to create a society and started focusing a lot on the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. My mother is the founder of the Red Ribbon Skirt Society out of Rapid City, South Dakota. And so through that, that's kind of where we started to do that work and start educating and spreading this awareness. And so that's why it says Red Ribbon Skirt Ambassadors. My two daughters, these are actually my daughters. And then Sadie, she works with me now at DIW. So we do have other members, but, obviously having the relationship as their mom is it's easier for us to kind of talk about some of these difficult topics. So I'm going to pass it on to the next slide.
Hamadak yapi. Hello, my relatives. So I'm going to explain the topic of why we are coming to speak with you today. MMIW stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. But you might hear Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives or People, MMIP or R. This is just to be more inclusive because we did find out with MMIW, we had a lot more than just women who are involved in being trafficked and who are faced this injustice. And this epidemic has been occurring for many decades. We even include Pocahontas in this. Any victim of colonization where their life was taken away or missing and taken from their homes, so including the boarding school, residential school students. And yeah, this is an international crisis. I don't know if you've heard in Canada, this is also going on with the First Nations people, as well as all around here.
So I'm just going to go through a few current statistics, but there hasn't been a lot recently because I feel like it's just not being taken serious enough for even more recent statistics. But out of 5,712 known incidents of missing and murdered Native women, only 116 were put into the DOJ database. 96% of sexual violence against Native women are committed by non-Natives on some reservations. 84% of Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Native women are 10 times more likely to be murdered compared to the national rate. In the age range of 10 to 24, homicide is the third leading cause of death for Indigenous women. 3 out of 5 Native American women have been assaulted in their lifetime, and 48% of American Indian women will experience stalking.
So next we're going to talk about man camps. These are encampments of men that are working on oil, gas, and or like mining projects. And they bring a lot of unnecessary violence to mostly reservations, as they are usually in rural areas. With the rise in population due to the camps, with all of the workers that it brings, and it leads to the community struggle with like more physical and sexual crime rates, increasing like rape, sexual assault, and sex trafficking. So when experiencing the subjects listed above, like one can gain a lot of mental health issues. It just creates a lot of unnecessary fear within our community when these pipelines are going into place, not only for the environment, but just because of what it brings with these men that are coming into our lands.
So if you see a red dress or a red hand, this is typically a symbol of this movement, No More Stolen Sisters movement, or No More Stolen movement. You are also hear the term, am I going to be next? Who is next? Say her name, are common phrases that you'd hear in, say, like our marches that we attend. There's one in February that typically happens around Valentine's Day. The red hand is also often shown over the mouth, which is meant to represent those who have been silenced on this issue. And then just in general, for those women who no longer have a voice for themselves. For example, the movie Wind River, which is specifically about a young Native American woman, is murdered from a man who is part of a man camp. This news segment committed to MMIW have become more common because of the podcast as well.
I'd also like to mention that the color red in our way is the color that the spirits can see. So when we wear that red and we're out marching or protesting or recalling our lost relatives or murdered relatives, those spirits can see us and they know that we're remembering them and that we're thinking about them. And so that's why the color red in particular is the one that we use for that. So yeah, the No More Stolen Sisters, like Sita was saying earlier too, is all over Indian country. And with my mother's work with the Red Ribbon Skirt Society, she works with family members of those that have gone missing and or have been murdered. And so there's a lot of grief that comes with that. And it's very difficult to relate to people that haven't gone through something like that. And so that's kind of when we try to go out and spread this awareness, and just also realizing that there are people out there in mourning and going through this all the time. So always just remembering, like when we pray and stuff, and if we put our tobacco, we're always thinking about the families and those that are gone. And then due to historical trauma, our people are more prone to, like with the statistics, just because we do have higher rates of suicide, drug use, alcohol use, because of all the, our culture was, they try to take our culture away, try to take our language away, they literally took our kids away. And so we have that grief, and so that's kind of how we end up dealing with it, and then that makes us more vulnerable.
So how has this epidemic affected families in Indian country and urban communities? Just like what Madge said, we have to look back to help understand what's going on now with the ongoing issues that we're experiencing. So we can look to boarding schools. As we know, they have had and continue to have a lasting impact on our peoples and forced cycles of sexual abuse and violence on our Indigenous communities, with the purpose to look down on our culture and our way of life. Boarding schools were fueled by the idea of kill the Indian to save the man. This was originally stated by Richard Pratt, and this continued to assimilate us and to look at our traditional ways of life through a lens of shame and enacting systematic violence on all Native people. As investigations have been taking place, over 7,310 remains have been found on these boarding school grounds, and that number is going to continue to change as investigations continue. Fairly recently, 9 children were brought home to Rosebud to have proper burials and honoring. So this history is not just a part of the past. It's alive to this day, and like as Indigenous people, we remember and we hold that history in our bodies. And it's a big factor that plays into the issues that we face to this day, like missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. In our communities, we often are the only ones that notice when we go missing, so we're the only ones that are organizing searches for these relatives and investigating on our own to try and bring them home.
So I would like to tell you about one case in particular that you may or may not have heard of. There's actually a bill that came out of this story. It's called the Savannah's Act, which directs the Department of Justice to review, revise, and develop law enforcement and justice protocols to address the issue of MMIW. So Savannah LaFontaine Graywind in 2017 was 8 months pregnant, and she was lured into her neighbor's apartment, and the baby was removed from her stomach. The baby actually survived, but she was found in the Red River off the Minnesota border. And so because that happened, that one in North Dakota, Ruth Buffalo was one of the senators over there, and so they started enacting some more laws, and so that's where that Savannah's Act came from. And that case is horrible, but that's just one of many that oftentimes we won't hear about our people, but we'll hear about, like, say, a Gabby Petito. That's her name, right? Petito. So there's women that go missing that everybody knows about in America, right? But when our people go missing, it's like Sadie was saying, maybe it's just the families that know or just our local communities. And so through Savannah's Act, we're trying to make sure that there's more awareness and involvement when our people go missing.
And I just want to say with that case that my mom's mentioning, that Petito case, in that very state that she was in Wyoming, 710 Indigenous people were reported missing between 2011 and 2020. So in the 8 days between when her family reported that she was missing on September 11th and when her remains were found on the 19th, 3 Indigenous people, Sterling Prince Red Star, Marquis Shea Williams, and Chloe Bulk Elk, were missing in Montana. Yet we do not know their names. We're not saying she deserves less attention, but rather Indigenous people deserve the same.
Just to talk about a few more relatives, just to share their story and to keep their memories alive. The ones I'll be talking about are actually within the state of Minnesota. So Nevaeh Kingbird, say her name. This has been an ongoing case within Minnesota, specifically Bemidji, which is a known hotspot for disappearances and trafficking. Nevaeh went missing October 22nd of 2021. At the time, she was 15 years old. Last seen, she was leaving a party over in Carter Circle in the southern end of Bemidji, and her family and community still come together and organize search parties for her to keep her memory alive. Along with her, Jeremy Jourdain is another name that we continue to say. Jeremy was 17 at the time of his disappearance, and he was last seen in the area of 6th Street, which is also southeast, and Wood Avenue, which is southeast of Bemidji as well, on October 31st in 2017. He was also leaving a Halloween party, and he was last seen wearing blue and gray hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and black and white Air Jordan shoes. Numerous searches, again, continue to take place, but investigators still have come up with nothing. And one more, which was brought to me by a relative, which I had just heard about her, was Melissa Christina Woodworth, or Bert. She has been missing from Alexandria, Minnesota since November 7th of 2020. Her last social media activity was in December of 2020, and there's been a lot of weird tips that have come with this case, but her family stated that it is extremely unlike her to be out of contact with them. She was 52 at the time of her disappearance, and she's Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. brown hair, brown eyes. She's 5'6", 140 pounds, and my cousin also shared with me that her brother searches for her endlessly to this day.
So looking ahead, just for more stuff that can be done, and some of this stuff has been done. In the state of Minnesota, we do have a MMIW task force, and we do have an office. I believe it's in Bloomington. There are 5 other states that have the Operation Lady of Justice, or Operation Lady Justice units. Minnesota, South Dakota, Arizona, Wyoming, and California, I believe. And so we are starting to get more attention, and we are starting to get more actual offices that are putting effort and work into this crisis. And then I already talked about Savannah Act. And then, that's kind of our MMIW, like kind of basic stuff. And then another thing that our youth, young women's society does is we have a podcast called the Sacred Sisters Podcast. We have 2 seasons. I believe we have, how many episodes? Like 17, I think. Some of them are kind of, like we did a scary one because a lot of these topics are really heavy. So sometimes we have to kind of take a break from that. So we do have some ones on there that are kind of just us wanting to talk about stuff. But most of them are about injustices, human trafficking, other cases, even stuff like natives in the media, how we're covered in the media, just stuff that our young women want to talk about, and that we believe needs to be heard. So I'm going to pass it to Grace to talk about one of the episodes.
So one of the cases that we did on the podcast, we told Richenda Rubidu's story. So I'm going to briefly explain what happened to her. She was 11 years old when she went missing in September of 1997 in Rosebud. Her mom reported her missing as soon as she felt something was off because she didn't come home after staying at a friend's house. And so she immediately reported it to the police, and there was no action taken. So she went to the tribal council, and they organized a search for her. 7 days after she was missing, Richenda's mother, Elizabeth, received an anonymous tip that she was in Mission, South Dakota, and that's where they found Richie's remains. This case is unsolved, and the authorities have not released any information about the autopsy. This was one of the families that my grandma Lily had reached out to first. I don't know, what year did she start this? 2016,
Yeah,
I think.
I think 2016.
And so I've been growing up hearing about this case, and I've always felt very attached to Richenda, and like I just feel for her, and I feel like I know her because we talk about her so much, and we've talked with the family. But yeah, that's why it's one of the cases that I'm really passionate about sharing. And we share a lot of cases. I like to do a lot of the research for them. I try to find as much information that I can, but unfortunately I can't find a lot of information. There's not many news articles about these girls or anything. And it's really disheartening to find that out. Like if I went missing, would I have a bunch of articles about me? Because I would want that for myself. So yeah, it's really sad and heartbreaking to hear that and see that. But in the rest of the episode, we just talked about our experiences with harassment in the cities, and then just trying to relate to each other, help each other out, tell each other what to do when something happens, like reporting it to someone who's there.
Our group also, as our society, we have a safe word. That's if any of us put it on social media, we know that something's wrong, and so we can contact each other. That's kind of one of the ways that we have this sisterhood together. just we're always trying to have each other's backs because we know we're targets.
So yeah, I think Sita, if you want to go to your episode.
So an episode I just wanted to highlight and shout out, I guess, is the human trafficking episode. So we had the opportunity to interview my cousin. She's a probation officer in South Dakota, I think Pennington County office. But she was able to be part of a sort of sting operation on a human trafficking during the Sturgis rallies. And so Sturgis in South Dakota is the motorcycle rallies, and people come from all over the world and the nation to this small state. And there's an increase of human trafficking, of course, and the jurisdiction. And her image was reversed to make her look younger, and was put out there on the internet and was trying to get pursued by a perpetrator, and luckily they got that person. I don't believe we know if that was an in or out of state specifically case.
Yeah, they ended up arresting 9 men in this ring, and they were gonna sell my niece, their cousin, for $200, and they found out, like, they looked her up within, I think it was only 2 days. And they were ready to sell her, and so they went to go meet, and then that's when they arrested them. So, it was really brave of my niece to do that, and she actually asked my mom and us, like, our opinion about doing that, because, she could still be recognized, and then being that she's a probation officer to get the, I don't know, like if they were to find her or something like that. So, but yeah, she bravely did that and was able to help take down 9 men. So that's the kind of work that my mom and our family does, and with Sadie too, just trying to make sure that we try and prevent it, I guess, from happening. So.
And then in that episode, I guess I'm just really proud of that one. It's one of our longer episodes. We also just talk about human trafficking in Minnesota and Minneapolis. There was an increase during the pandemic, and that showed in a specific case that Sadie talks about, the Lazaro case. And I can't remember, I know it was that one Lazaro person who was the operation of that, but it involved a lot of minors in the state.
Yeah, in particular up in Duluth with the lake up there, that's a big hot spot for trafficking. Also, when they were doing the pipelines up there, Line 3, that's where one of those big man camps was. Currently, they're trying to put one down by Pipestone, Minnesota. And Pipestone is where we literally get our pipe stone from, right? That's the only place we can get it. So if that pipe leaks or does anything, that's going to affect our entire culture, because we use our pipes to pray. And so, of course, they're going to bring more man camps down there as well, too. And that's closer to, like, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's right next to Flandreau Reservation. So, again, they choose to put these pipelines and or do these things around tribal nations, and then that's how we become targets. So I know recently I was up in Mandaree, North Dakota, and they have a lot of oil rigs up there. And I remember when these girls were little, they went up there with my mom for a book fair, and she said she wouldn't let them walk around anywhere by themselves, in the casino, at the hotel, anywhere, even to the gas station, because it's just so dangerous. And it's crazy to think that society doesn't care, that not only, like Sadie said earlier, it's hurting the environment, but it's literally hurting us. I guess I'll just mention real quick too, as when we were talking about the boarding schools and the residential schools, tomorrow is the National Day of Remembrance and the National Day of Reconciliation. And so in Minneapolis, we usually go on the march, and orange is the color for that. And orange is, the reason that orange is the color is there was a young lady, her grandma bought her an orange shirt because she said, oh yeah, you're going off to school, and she thought it would be a good thing. So she bought her an orange shirt. When she got to the boarding school, they made her take, took her clothes, cut her hair, and so she was just sad because she really liked that orange shirt. And so when she got out of school, she shared that story. So now that's why orange is the color for that day. But again, those children and that were taken, that's another missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. They're included in that because they were taken and never came home.
Just like other topics that we talk about on the podcast is a lot also about self-care, because it is such heavy topics that you need to take care of yourself after talking about these things. So like one of our practices that we do is smudge. We like to smudge a lot. Even just like journaling, we like to talk about that. Just taking care of yourself, I think, is a big priority for our group. And something that we also want to share with younger girls as well, because I don't think it's talked about enough. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think just because, like, growing up as, like, young Indigenous women, you're constantly, like Sita and Grace have mentioned, like, you're constantly hearing these statistics all the time, over and over again, like, being brought up, even when it's not even relevant to the conversation. So it can be very draining, and it creates, I feel like, a really, like, hard mental state to be in. And so I think that's also another huge reason, like Grace said, that we created this, was because we wanted to make sure that, like, our young girls and our young kids they're always listening, and that they know that they can look to us for help if the weight of it is too much. Like, we make sure that we check in with each other and be there for one another, because it can be really heavy, and it's hard to sometimes it's hard to like I was having such a hard time yesterday, like, having to write this out, and like I had to reach out to one of my relatives who lives in Cass Lake, which is on the Leech Lake Reservation, and she was so grateful to me. She was like, thank you so much, my girl, for coming forward and speaking out, because it's so hard because these are people that are in our community. These are our mothers, these are our sisters, these are our aunties. And it's really disheartening to see that we're the only ones that end up caring in the end. So that's part of our podcast, is just spreading awareness. And that's one of the biggest things. I feel like people always ask, like, well, what can we do? And that's like supporting the Red Ribbon Skirt Society that Lily Mendoza runs, and just educating yourself, reading. I feel like Facebook is kind of our big, like, news. It's kind of like our native news. That's where we usually see, like, missing posters and stuff, or like, hey, I haven't seen my relative, and they live in the cities. Can you check on them? So it's really just like passing information. If you see flyers, say something, spread awareness. I want to shout out Marcy Rendon. She's a local author and poet, and she does a lot of writings about missing and murdered Indigenous women. She's a great source. Her books are amazing, and she does a lot of great work to, again, continue to spread awareness.
Yeah, there's another book out there by Joseph Marshall III called Sing for the Red Dress, and that is about a young woman it's a fictitious story, but it's kind of based around a bunch of stories. And so that one was just released May 5th, actually. May 5th is the National Recognition Day of MMIW. And that's because there was a young lady named Hannah Harris out of Montana who was murdered, and May 5th was her birthday. And so her mom, went to the governor, and then they rallied up and they made it a national day of awareness. So yeah, that's May 5th.
Also on May 5th, my grandma, I know we keep talking about her, but she really runs like everything for the Red Ribbon Skirt Society. But she does a red dress gala where we all come in red. And the first year she had families talk about their loved ones, which was really hard to hear from them directly. And then this year, she had artists do a panel and then talk about each of their works as well. And she also does auctions, silent auctions, and just gets everyone together to get all pretty and have a good time with each other and kind of have fun instead of being really sad.
Yeah, and all the funds go to families of our relatives. Like there was somebody that was found murdered in Utah, but she was from Rapid City. So through the Red Ribbon Skirt Society, we were able to send them money to bring them home. So we're literally bringing them home. Or if there's for funerals, help with that and that kind of thing too. So we're kind of like it had said, ambassadors for Red Ribbon Skirt Society, and then we just kind of added our own little twist, being in Minneapolis, of course, but also making sure that these girls have a space to say what they want, how they want to do it. We do art. We've done some art pieces that's at DIW.
Well, with the families and Grace talking about Richenda's case, and I just remember, or I think this is in the podcast episode too, but I remember hearing my grandma ask her mom how she was doing, and no one asked her since her daughter passed how she was doing with that death. And it's like, that's the kind of people-centered work that you can't really get anywhere else. The law enforcement isn't really providing that, and so she's really fulfilling that need, and we're passing that on, hopefully, you know?
Yeah, kind of the grassroots idea, because we are in community, and they're the literal young women that live South Minneapolis, you know, and so it's important that the people that are working on this issue and spreading awareness are part of it too. Like we know more about what's going on with the encampments. We put together bags for young ladies, like care packages, kind of so that they don't have to maybe turn to a male or another female and get used or trafficked to get certain needs met. And that was their idea. They're like, well, if a young lady like their age wanted to look pretty and say get fake eyelashes, right? If they didn't have that money, maybe they would go to somebody in that encampment and do something bad to get that money. So that's kind of some of the little bit of the stuff that we do, just like I was saying, trying to prevent it from even happening.
And I just also want to talk about, like, Madge and I work at DIW for the Youth Leadership Development Program. I feel like youth programs are also another preventative or just an extra measure to make sure, like, we know where our kids are, we know what they're doing, and if they're going through something, you know, if they can't share with their family, at least they also have us in their lives, like, because it's a youth group, but also, like, we're like a big family, and we do a lot to also educate our kids at a very young age, like, you know, don't talk to strangers, like, you know, if someone's trying to, you know, be weird or something in your family, like, speak up, and you can always come to us. So I feel like along with that too, of like the girls come and they volunteer too, and the kids are just so happy to like have, you know, older Native girls in their life to like rely on, and feeling like they have more family in their life, so that, you know, none of them are going to fall through the cracks. Like, we know where they are, and if anything was to ever happen, like, we would be the first ones to come forward. So I just feel like our youth program is just so precious and important for our Native youth to have a safe space to come to and just be themselves.
So yeah, I guess it's almost going to be 10, so I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
Yeah, this is an opportunity, so we'll bring the microphone around.
I was just wondering if you could, first I wanted to say that I'm really glad that you're here and you're sharing your stories and helping us increase awareness of the struggles that you have as women and your fears. It's really brave of you to do that. But I wanted you to repeat your podcast, and somehow if we can be more involved with even listening, we can be a part of helping.
So it's called Sacred Sisters Podcast, and I think it was on the first slide. And you can find it on, Sacred Sisters Podcast. I think it's on most places you can download it.
Oh, yeah.
We also have an Instagram page and a Facebook page for it. And all the episodes are on there, and then it gives a little blurb about each one. Like our first one is like really long, and it was just, we're getting used to it, and we're just all talking all over each other. So that's like, okay. But yeah.
If you look it up, it should be, there's 2 podcasts with the name. Ours is one with a woman with the red hand on her face. But you should be able to see it if you look it up on Google or Safari.
Yeah, and then just looking for Young Women's Society, because that's also what we go by.
Yeah, and in Lakota, it's Wikoshkalaka Ominichie, but that's kind of hard to pronounce. So we just do Young Women's Society. But yeah, originally we had used the language for our group.
I have 2 questions. One is the police don't seem to show up. Is that true for tribal police as well, or is it? That's one question. That's maybe a simple question. The other thing that pops into my mind is, do we have any clue? I think about this man camp that's going to come in near Pipestone, and I know that area well. And I feel like the opposition to that routing is partly because of the space of Pipestone, and also because of the concern for the earth, which I get. But it seems to me that there's actually a third concern that may actually have more power, which is how to keep women safe from these man camps. And is there any sense that if these man camps couldn't be within 100 miles of a reservation, that difficulty would be reduced?
Yeah, so for the first question, I would say that one of the biggest problems is the jurisdiction. So like say, I grew up in Rapid City, and Pine Ridge Reservation is only an hour and a half away. And so if you're crossing that border, you're going to be dealing with the tribal police. But then if you go back and commit a crime on there and you're back on the other side, oftentimes they have a hard time working together. And I know this because my brother is also a cop in Rapid City. And he's a native cop, right? So he kind of has more of a communication with the tribal police, but they still have a hard time, working together. It's just how people are. I don't know specifically if they don't show up as much as, like, say, just regular county or city police. And another thing that I didn't mention before too, like saying that my brother is a cop and a detective. And so also when they do find women, and to make sure that they're treating our relatives properly and using certain protocols and certain medicines, to make sure that they're taken care of right. I don't know, does that make sense? But yeah, I'm not really sure, like statistic-wise or anything about how often the cops do show up, but I do know that jurisdiction is a huge issue, and I know that's something that the MMIP office is trying to figure out, because that even works for counties, you know, and it's so easy to, and like referring to the man camps again, they're from all over the place, but they're right by the reservations, and so those borders, if you cross them and then you come back, you know, there's not much you can do. Yeah, I don't know if the man camps were to be 100 miles from a reservation or anywhere. I mean, Native peoples are less than 1% of the population, but somehow we're the highest ones that are like taken. So it's, I don't know if the location really matters. I just think that the people that work in those man camps in particular, they know what they're looking for regardless of where they're at.
I feel like it's hard to, you know, if they were further away from reservations, like who's to say, like if that would really, you know, solve an issue, because I remember I was in high school at the time when Pipeline 3 was going through, which was really close to the White Earth Reservation where I am from and grew up. And like Madge said, like if they have an agenda, if these men, you know, are a part of like a ring or something, like who knows, you know, they're gonna go out and they're gonna look for people. And that's what was happening in our community. It was a lot of fear mongering during that time because there was people going around our reservations and our villages and talking to kids that were out on their bikes and stuff like that. And in reservations, you know, there's kids out playing in the yard, they're on their bikes, they're hanging out with their friends and stuff. And during that time, most of us had to be indoors during that time because it was being, because there's like these men coming around and trying to pick up kids and stuff. So it's hard to say like if that would solve the problem because, you know, if there's a will, there's a way. And for these men, like if they have an agenda, they're going to try and do whatever they can to get what they want. So it's really hard to say, like, just in general, like, what's going to be a solution for us. I know that, you know, we're going to do whatever it takes to protect Pipestone. And, yeah.
You, younger people in particular, are doing such good work in the process, learning so much about yourselves and educating yourselves about life. How is this possibly shaping what your plans may be, education, formal education-wise, and vocationally for what you see as important work personally to be part of a few or 5 years from now?
I guess I'd say my my relationship with the Young Women's Initiative within the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. I'm a cabinet member of that. I'm learning more about policy and stuff, and just advocating and testifying and just learning more about just how the law works and the system works. And that's been really nice. And it's also, I feel like my voice is appreciated because I am one of the few Native girls there. And like Savannah Graywin's case, she's 22 years old, I'm 22 years old. Just knowing that like I need to continue doing this work because I need to continue speaking for them. Yeah.
I think for me, I took a break after high school from not going to college right away, and I've just been working at Division of Indian Work within our youth program, and that has been a really amazing experience to be with Native kids just basically every single day and like, you know, whatever they need, like being a good relative to them. And it's also helped kind of shape what I want to do. So I kind of want to, like, going back into school, I'm thinking about counseling or some kind of way to, like, be a therapist for kids, specifically Native youth, because there's not a lot of, I feel like, Native-specific therapists. But I think that perspective is really, really needed for our youth because they're already experiencing so much. So I think for me, it's kind of just driven me more to want to like focus on that when it comes to going back into school.
So I'm a cosmetology student, so that's not very like I don't know, not really helping me with this. But I also do feel like I don't really need that because I'm just so passionate about this topic and this issue that using my voice is very important. Not every young Native youth does this. And so I think it's important to just use my voice. Also with my grandma, I've learned a lot from her. I think she's one of like the main, or who I look up to every day. And so I think just having her there to help me and guide me through this is also very helpful.
And, you know, as the co-founder of this society, I just look forward to them and to see what they can do, and just keep this awareness going, keep doing more and working more. And I'm really proud of these young ladies.
I really appreciate all you've told us, and I feel like we're a little bit more aware. What can we do? What can we do to help? Not just read a book, not just be aware. What can be done?
Yeah, that's a tough one because people always ask us that, and it's like, well, you know, I mean, of course, attending these events and stuff to keep that awareness, but I mean, even marches, protests, supporting policy out there that is starting to move forward. Senator Mary Kunish is very, she's actually on the board for Division of Indian Work, and so working with her or hearing what she has to say, and she's, you know, she's the one, she got the license plates now, and so yeah, like, you know, using her voice for voting and making sure that we support those policies, I think is a pretty good way to do that, especially, you know, this year in particular, it's coming up fast. And, you know, Lieutenant Governor Peggy's from White Earth as well, and so she's always a big proponent for this crisis.
One last. Yeah.
I do think the main thing is just researching and bringing awareness to this issue, because even like I went to, me and Sita went to Minnehaha Academy, and we would hold presentations like this at our school, and after 3 years of doing them, there were still kids in my school who didn't know what it was because they weren't paying attention. And so I just think it's important to just tell people about it because word of mouth is one of the best ways to get the word around. So,
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists today. Thank you all so much. Next week, we will be welcoming Ana Zeros, Director of Organizational Advancement for Nonviolence Peace Force, Minneapolis, and Westminster member Gretchen Musicant will be highlighting recent work of the Nonviolence Peace Force Minneapolis in the Philippines. We look forward to seeing you then. Meanwhile, continue to listen, continue to learn, and continue to pray. Thank you.